So, if you've been paying any attention to this channel as of recent, you'll know that I've been thinking of diversifying my content into new terrain, taking my videos on pastures new. Obviously, I'll be sticking with Iceberg charts, but YouTube is an unforgiving mistress, and if you don't evolve, you will go extinct. So for this reason, after consulting with you, I came to the conclusion that in-depth stories on lost media is the way forward. This is what you all want to see, so in this series I'll be scouring the internet trying to find the most interesting stories in which lost media is somehow involved. It might be the focal point, or it might just be a side plot involved in a grand narrative at play. Ladies and gentlemen, to kickstart this potential flagship series, I have a story of tragedy, corruption, redemption, and awe. So without further ado, today I'm going to tell you the story of Dorothy Gibson and her lost film, Saved from the Titanic, because this is Tales from Lost Media. That's the jingle. We're gonna do that every time. That's the new intro. So here we go. Now, because this is an in-depth story, I need to go over some background. Dorothy Gibson was one of America's pioneers of silent film, as well as both a model and a singer. She was extremely talented in multiple facets. Born in 1889, she grew up without a father, with her dad dying when she was 3. Fortunately, her mother remarried. As I mentioned before, she was an actress, and in fact she was one of the first actresses in the world to be considered a star in their own right. She found success in early projects such as 1911's Miss Masquerader and 1912's Love Finds a Way. During the shooting of these films, she was in her early 20s and seemingly had her whole future ahead of her. However, this success wouldn't last long, as her next film role, despite being the one that she was most remembered for, it was her most popular role by far, it would actually turn out to be her last. That film was Etienne Arnaud's 1912 silent film, Saved from the Titanic. Now, if you know much about the Titanic's history, you might be wondering if I misspoke, because the Titanic sank to the depths of the Atlantic Ocean on her maiden voyage in the early hours of April 15, 1912. How could this woman be in a film about it in the very same year? Well, if you aren't familiar with this story, you might be even more surprised to find out that the film's release date was the 14th of May 1912, less than 1 month after the sinking of the Titanic. Obviously, this was a deeply tragic event at the time. 1,500 people died. I mean, imagine if someone made a 9/11 film in October 2001. Some did indeed criticise the film for being perhaps insensitive to a nation still grieving. Still, while this is fascinating, that's not even the kicker, because the film's lead actress and co-writer, Dorothy Gibson, was actually on board the Titanic when it sank. She was playing a game of bridge in the late hours of April 14th, and she was awake when the ship hit the iceberg. She was put on Lifeboat 7, also known as the very first lifeboat to be launched. Many put the fact that Dorothy survived down to the fact that she was playing bridge at the time and had not gone to bed. The production of the film is just as interesting too, because if you thought that this woman just wrote a Titanic film in a month after surviving the tragedy and that was the end of the story, you wouldn't be close, because Dorothy's story has only just begun. The film's writing began within days of Dorothy coming back to the US. She had been on holiday in Europe when she boarded the ship. However, she clearly wasn't over the trauma that she had experienced on board. This wasn't helped by the fact that her costume in the film were the exact same clothes that Dorothy was wearing when the ship sank for added realism. This all proved too much for Dorothy, and it was reported that she had breakdowns. She was reduced to tears multiple times on set. Again, this wasn't healthy for her, but Eclair Studios, the company producing the film, wanted it to come out. For you see, this film's release wasn't this similar to a YouTube video on a trend these days. It was kind of in the moment, it was big news, people wanted to see it, and they wanted to see it fast. Anyways, the film was a huge success with both audiences and critics alike. People praised Dorothy for her brave and realistic performance. Obviously in 1912 we didn't have many films, but nonetheless it was praised for its depiction. As I previously mentioned, some people weren't on board with the film due to how fresh the tragic events of the Titanic were in people's minds. But again, we regard this as a tragedy even over 100 years later, let alone much less than 100 days. Having said this though, these people were in the minority, the rest loved it. However, the success wouldn't last, as this would be Dorothy Gibson's last film role at the age of 23. In fact, she had just turned 23 the week of the release of this film. Filming Saved from the Titanic took its toll on Gibson. It took a mental toll, as she had multiple mental breakdowns throughout the shooting of the movie. Saved from the Titanic reportedly gave Dorothy an existential crisis, and she would never appear on film again. To make matters worse, her final film role would not be enjoyed by the world for very long. Eclair Studios, more recently known for their production of film cameras, just like the one Francois Truffaut used for his 1959 masterpiece Breathless, was an Eclair. Well, Eclair Studios, which was established in New Jersey, suffered from a fire in 1914, a great fire that burned the entire building to ash. There really isn't too much information of this blaze up on the internet, because maybe it too is lost. I don't know who started the fire, I don't know how the fire was started, I don't know how long it took for the relevant authorities to come and put out the fire. All I know is that the building caught alight and everything was lost. Among them, unfortunately, was Saved from the Titanic, the very film that caused a budding actress, one of the world's first stars, to leave the industry forever, was a film that was lost, nearly as quickly as it was made. Perhaps wrangling around someone's attic is a copy. Another Eclair movie, The Girl Stage Driver, was thought to be lost, but was somehow rediscovered in the New Zealand Film Archive as recently as 2009, so all hope is not lost. So, what became of Dorothy Gibson? Well, my friends, that is a story in and of itself, and I'm telling you, I seriously cannot believe I have uncovered such a goldmine of information, because Dorothy Gibson lived one of the most interesting lives of all time. Firstly, many people believe that her partner goaded her into co-writing Saved from the Titanic, which is very much believable due to the fact that it ruined her mental state. Why would she do this to herself? And who was her partner, you may ask?
Drum roll, please. Can anybody guess?
Jules Brutolor. That's right. Okay, so unless you're really into your film history, you might not know who Jules Brutolor was. This dude was the co-founder of Universal, the conglomerate that brought you the Fast and the Furious franchise, the Jurassic Park franchise, Les Miserables, and the 50 Shades of Grey franchise, as well as a third of the music that you listen to, started by her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was the co-founder of Universal, which is huge, a huge conglomerate to say the least. She was in a relationship with Brutolor when the press leaked their relationship. And why did the press leak their relationship, I hear you ask? Nay, plead! Get this, they leaked it because Dorothy Gibson ran over and killed a pedestrian sometime in 1913. Not only this, but it was leaked that she was also Brutolor's mistress because he was still married to Clara Isabel Lewin. Once they divorced in 1915, Gibson and Brutolor made their relationship official, marrying in 1917. Though, with all things in her life, this soon changed because the couple divorced in 1919. This is the time in her life whereby there was relative stability, or at least I assume. Records of her during this time kind of dry up at this point. However, this would be short-lived because the year is 1939. Picture this. You've become one of the first film stars in the world, you survived the Titanic, you killed a pedestrian, and married a man who would form one of the largest and lucrative conglomerates of all time. What do? Well, Dorothy Gibson decided to allegedly become a Nazi spy. So this isn't confirmed, sources are conflicted. However, for the sake of storytelling, let's make things a bit more interesting and fun, and let's say that she was. 5 years later though, things are getting a bit boring for old Dorothy. Being a Nazi spy just isn't fun enough for her life. She decides to completely flip 180 and becomes an anti-fascist, eventually getting arrested and getting put into a Nazi prison. This would have been the end for Dorothy Gibson. Sources say that she would have died in prison. Would have. Emphasis on the would, because Dorothy Gibson, like the legend she was, decided that she wanted to get out of prison, and so she would. She was able to use a bloke by the name of Luca Osteria to get out of prison. Now, this dude was such a good double agent, I don't even know if he was pro or anti-Nazi. According to his Wikipedia page, which I translated, it says, and I quote, "He was the creator of the counter-espionage of the fake anti-fascist organisation, Terzo Fronte." I mean, there are just too many negatives here. Counter-espionage of anti-fascist. I don't even know. Anyways, she escaped and lived out the rest of her days in relative peace compared to the rest of her life, dying in 1946 of a heart attack at the age of 56. I'm sure if she would have lived a bit longer, who knows what kind of interesting stuff she would have gotten up to. She was able to experience every bit of the early 1900s. Her story in many ways is lost media itself, because for as much as we know about her life as an actress, there are so many questions that are still posed. Scouring the internet, there's not too much about her, which is insane because she lived such an interesting and full life. But even so, I think we can all agree that she lived as full of a life as any one person could. I'm Fox Akimbo, and this has been Tales from Lost Media. That's it, my friends. That was Tales of Lost Media, and in my opinion, a fantastic episode to start off this new series with. If you enjoyed, please do interact with this video. That means like it, comment on it, share it, or even subscribe. This is a new series. I don't know how it's going to do, so the more people that like and comment, the more it's going to be shown to people, and the more likely I will be to want to make more. Aside from that, I have an Instagram now. Don't be afraid to follow me on that, or on my Twitter. Join my Discord, link in the description as always, and let me know down in the comments what you'd like to see me do next, as I'm only 38 videos in, and I'm already out of ideas. Thank you for watching.